Hi, I'm Brennan Spiegel. I'm Director of Health Services Research here at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. And I'm happy to be with you today to briefly present an area that you may not have heard too much about, but I'm going to review this new field of medicine called medical extended reality, or MXR. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen now so that you can see my slides and get us started. And I'm going to start with this picture of me with a patient who happens to have lupus. She allowed us to use her image when we took this picture many years ago now. And at this moment, she is deciding whether or not to use that headset that she's holding to help manage her pain. Now, some of you may recognize that headset is a virtual reality headset, or VR. And most people, when they think about virtual reality, they think about a platform for gaming and for entertainment. You might have heard about using it for, games and kids playing games on it. But what I'd like to talk about today is VR is much more than that. Actually, when it was first developed in the mid-1950s, it wasn't for gaming at all. It was for simulations, initially for the Department of Defense to help train fighter pilots and helicopter pilots. But then over the subsequent several decades, psychology laboratories around the world discovered that virtual reality has profound effects on the human mind. And of course, in theory, that could be misused. But as we'll see, it could be used to actually support human health and well-being in surprising ways. Now, over a year ago, Mark Zuckerberg made this announcement that Facebook was changing its name to Meta. And at the time, this was kind of a marketing gimmick of sorts, or at least it seemed that way. But now we're learning that actually what's going on is they're developing this new version of the internet that will be called the metaverse. And there are now books that are being distributed and written about this metaverse, whatever it is. We're still trying to figure it out. But what we think it's going to be is a form of the internet where you experience it, maybe even on glasses, just on your face, where you can have augmented reality, overlaid computer scenes on your glasses, or virtual reality, where you are embedded into these three-dimensional worlds. And so we've been learning about this, and most people, well, when they think about this, they either think, well, that's sort of science fiction-y, or maybe they think about the movie Ready Player One, which was a Steven Spielberg movie based upon the book, where it was this sort of dystopian, sort of sad future where humans were no longer in real reality, or RR, but were in virtual reality in these headsets, not connecting with one another. Well, there's always concern about that. But the truth is this is happening. So whatever we might think about this, there's 10,000 programmers in Europe alone developing this metaverse. So the idea is, what can we do now in healthcare to kind of protect some corner of this metaverse and create the metaverse, a place that can support human health and well-being and give people tools and skills and abilities that they can then bring back into real reality to live richer and more profound, meaningful lives as a result of having practiced certain skills in the metaverse. So this may all seem a bit fantastical, but in fact, it's been an area of great research going back now several decades. If you look at the number of papers that have been published in the peer-reviewed literature on PubMed that use the word virtual reality, you can see there's been an exponential growth in the last few years. In last year alone, there were over 3,000 studies looking at the use of virtual reality in healthcare. And now there are over 18,000 studies in all studying VR for a wide variety of conditions. And today I'll be focusing more of my comments on pain management. Now, this is a picture of a patient at Cedars-Sinai from a few years ago who is using virtual reality to help manage his pain. And at this particular moment, you can see that he has this expression on his face, almost an emotional expression. And he is actually, rather than being in a hospital, which is where he physically is, he's on a helicopter flying over fjords in Iceland. And this is sort of the first message that we've learned, is that emotion really matters. And what I mean by that is, if you think back to your most powerful memories, both the positive memories and the negative memories, all of them most likely were strongly influenced by an emotion. There was some emotional experience, positive or in some cases quite negative, that almost burned the memory into your brain. And so we know that one way to learn is to have an emotional reaction to the material. And so that's the first thing that virtual reality is able to do. As I'll show you with the brain scans, it allows us to almost access the emotion centers in the brain and lay down powerful memories as a result that can be durable and last long after the headset has been removed. So you can imagine, we could misuse this by scaring people or, giving them nightmares or something horrible like that. But also, as we'll see, we can support people in sometimes very meaningful and compelling ways. This is another image of us using virtual reality in the hospital at Cedars-Sinai. We've now treated over 3,000 patients with our inpatient VR consult service. Here I'm standing next to Dr. Omer Liran, who's a psychiatrist who has been developing our VR programs to help support pain. And you can see in this particular image that there are cables in the foreground. It's almost as if she's sort of trapped in this room, almost in a way like a jail cell. And that's sort of a metaphor for what it can be like, of course, to experience chronic pain, to be trapped with this chronic feeling of physical, emotional, and cognitive distress. And so this idea of escape really matters. The ability to go beyond your own mind, your own body, even beyond the four walls that you're physically within, to escape to fantastical and therapeutic worlds. And I'll show you a bit more about that. This is an example. This is called Trip VR, and it's a software program. I'm going to turn down the sound so you can hear me. That we use to help bring people to these beautiful environments. It's hard to explain what it's like in this two-dimensional screen, but in 3 dimensions, you're literally surrounded by this world and you interact with it, and your brain feels as if it's literally there, even if emotionally, or rather, even if cognitively, that you're not literally in these fantastical worlds. Your brain never evolved to live in 2 places at once, so it sort of takes it at face value. And the reactions are quite profound, and I'll show you more about what that does to the brain. Now, this is another example. This is a patient named Harmon Clark, who's allowed us to show his image and to use his name. He has experienced chronic pain from inflammatory bowel disease, and he actually used virtual reality to help him reduce and actually completely get off of opioids. That's not possible in everybody, I recognize, and not everyone's on opioids. And for many people, opioids are very important. But we also know that there can be considerable side effects. And so he decided to use VR to help titrate off of opioids. And he gave a separate lecture about that in one of our conferences. Now, when he comes to the hospital, the first thing he asks for is the virtual reality. And he says he likes to go into outer space and look back upon planet Earth. And this is an image of what he's looking at. And you can see him looking at planet Earth. And he says it gives him this sense of awe. He literally feels goosebumps. And this is something that astronauts in the International Space Station describe. When they look back at planet Earth, they feel as if they're part of something bigger. And it's actually a very empathic moment to have empathy for the world, empathy for yourself. And for Harmon Clark, he says the response that his nervous system has to that actually reduces his pain. Even after he takes the headset off, he can try and summon that feeling, and he learns how to practice that feeling of awe and that feeling of goosebumps that he gets. And in fact, this sign of goosebumps is a measure of how the nervous system can respond to this feeling of awe. And so there's been a study called Are You Awed Yet? How VR Gives Us Awe and Goosebumps, a study out of Vancouver and Simon Fraser University, where they took participants and they flew them up over their city. Then they flew them up over the Canadian Rockies, and then they launched them into outer space in virtual reality. And while they were doing this, they had a camera trained on their forearm called a goose cam that was measuring the goosebumps to see just what the reaction was physiologically to the virtual reality. And they were able to show a very high prevalence of goosebumps among people who used this experience. Now, we've been using other sensors to kind of learn more about what is going on in the mind and in the body to help reduce pain in particular. And this headset you're looking at, which is sort of taken apart, has sensors within it that allows us to measure the heart rate, also the heart rate variability, which is the beat-to-beat variation, which is a measure of autonomic nervous system activity and stress, even the pupil diameter. And all of that gets compiled into a single score that's called the cognitive load. And so we use this to help monitor patients' responses to virtual reality. And this actually is not a patient. This is me using virtual reality where I'm starting to meditate. You can see very quickly how my nervous system changes. I have lower cognitive load. My brain is not working as hard down here. And then very quickly, my colleague interrupts me with conversation. You can see how my nervous system changes. And then he walks out and I'm meditating peacefully again, and so on and so forth. Now, with that background, I want to show you an actual patient using virtual reality for pain. The patient is in the room, but not visualized, but I am showing you the data that we're collecting. There's two computers here. On the left, I'm going to show you her cognitive load, and on the right, what she's looking at. Now, again, she's in 3 dimensions, but she's on 2 dimensions. It looks like she's on a beach. She likes to go to the beach. She says it causes her to be relaxed. And so we brought her to the beach and we had this mandala that expands and contracts, and she then breathes slowly in and out as she begins this process. And when she first came in, she was in a lot of pain and anxiety and distress. And as she went through this process, you can see quickly on the computer how as soon as we started, there was a drop in her cognitive load, almost as if she was hypnotized. And right about here, she started to cry. And she said she was in heaven with her deceased son, who had tragically died in a car accident 6 months before this video was taken. Right about here, she said that she was with God. And she said that her belly felt fine, and that's where she was experiencing pain at the time. And she had no pain. She felt almost a numbness and a lightness about her. And even after she took the headset off, she said she still felt very light and did not have pain. And we explained to her that, we didn't necessarily cure your pain right now. It's going to most likely come back. But what's happening at this moment that the pain seems to be gone? What does that mean? It's almost like a supernatural power. It's natural because we didn't inject a medication or use a drug or put a needle in something. It's supernatural because it's almost as if she had this ability that's above her normal level of consciousness, super or above. And she was learning how to access this supernatural ability. And so we talked with her, and then we say this with many of our patients. When we talk with them, we say, listen, you have a brain. Okay, we all do. And the brain is not like a block of Play-Doh that's rattling around in the skull. The brain is a shape-shifting organ like any other organ in the body. It can change, and it changes all the time through the gift of neuroplasticity that we've all evolved. This is our ability to change the connections within our brain. And this is so important, not just because it allows us to learn and grow and mature, but also because even if you have inherited a body, that has betrayed you, that we try to fix with medications or with surgery. And we all have problems that we develop over our lifetime. Even if we've inherited a body that's betrayed us, we can still, and this is powerful, we can still alter how our brain perceives our body. And that is the aha moment that virtual reality can provide. And so what we then do with virtual reality is we bring people back, not just once, but over 56 days at home. They have a home-based virtual reality treatment program, which is very similar to what you might experience with talk therapy, with a therapist doing cognitive behavioral therapy. But not everyone has access to a psychologist, for example. And with virtual reality, we can allow people to do this at home. And when we look at what happens in the brain on virtual reality, it's quite compelling. This is research going back over 13 years ago, or more than that, more like 16 years ago, from Hunter Hoffman at the University of Washington, who did research using virtual reality, and then he did functional MRI scans of the brain. And what you can see in this example is on the left is somebody experiencing pain. And then on the right, the same patient is wearing a VR headset. It's actually a special headset that was designed for the MRI machine. And on the left, you can see the signals are greater. It's almost like flames compared to the right. But it's not just that there's lower signals on the right, it's the location of those signals. If you look on the left, you can see when somebody's in pain, this is the sensory cortex of the brain, where this is where you just feel the ouch, just hurts. But pain is more than just a physical experience. It can also be an emotional experience and a cognitive experience. The emotional centers are here in the middle, the limbic system, and the amygdala. And this is also where you see pain. And what we see with virtual reality is it appears to tamp down both types of pain. And in a head-to-head study, Hoffman found that it was as effective as hydromorphone, an opioid, just quite striking. Now, this has been seen in randomized clinical trials. On the left is a study from the University of Washington from 2011 of patients with severe burn injuries who are undergoing dressing changes. And this is a very severely painful experience. On the right, the University of Michigan, these are women who are going through childbirth. In both cases, they are randomized to virtual reality or no virtual reality. On this side, the virtual reality is the black bar. On this side, the VR is the white bar. And in all cases, what we see is a reduction in pain, but it's not just the sensory pain, the worst pain intensity, but also the cognitive pain. How much time are you spending thinking about the pain? And the affective, how unpleasant is the pain? In both of these studies, you see reductions across all three aspects of pain, which correlates with what's seen in the functional MRI scan. There's an interesting outcome, curious outcome called fun, which was measured in this burn injury study, and patients actually had more fun in virtual reality as well. So what these studies demonstrate is VR is not just a tool for gaming and entertainment. I'm hoping that you can understand that because it does much more than that. It's actually a tool that can profoundly modify our perception of the world around us and even the world within us. And if we can use it to recalibrate unhealthy perceptions, then VR has the potential to become a radical new therapy to improve quality of life and to augment our traditional therapeutics. Now, we've been doing this at Cedars-Sinai for quite some time. We have the largest hospital in the Western United States. We think of it as a large sort of natural laboratory to conduct research of this sort. And if you're in a hospital like this is what it looks like. But this is not really a place of rest. It's not really even a place of healing. It's in some cases almost like being in a jail cell, a biopsychosocial jail cell. And that's quite stark, but our patients can suffer physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. And all day long in the hospital, they look at this, and then somebody like me shows up, and I'm not necessarily smiling and pushing and prodding, and then disappear, and then come back again. And all day and night, this is the experience of what it's like to be in the hospital. So several years ago, we just started by asking ourselves, can we do better than that? What if we can give people the opportunity to escape to the four walls of this hospital room to fantastical destinations? Here she's reaching out to a blue whale that's swimming across her visual field. And we've been spending time initially just talking with our patients, learning from them what works and what doesn't work, and what does it feel like to use this headset? How does it feel in their body? Where would you like to go? People have preferences. Some people just, want to go to Hawaii and kind of hang out by a waterfall, or others might want to go to an ice cave or something, or go on a safari. But for others, we're using it for cognitive behavioral therapy, hypnotherapy, biofeedback therapy as well. And so we have an inpatient VR consult service. This is Dr. Omer Liron, who is showing off our mobile cart that we use. It has an ultraviolet box to clean the headsets, and then we clean it off. There's a machine here to cool off the computer that we use to run it. And I'm going to now show you a brief video of two of our patients using virtual reality for the first time. They're using a program that we create at Cedars called Nature VR. And it's a program of sort of beautiful scenes that people can go to and they can meditate. We have guided meditations, breathing exercises, and you'll hear the music that the patients are hearing and see with your own eyes what they're experiencing as this program called Nature VR. Yeah, we see that a lot actually. A lot of people that get emotional. Right.
I don't even have the words to explain it. It's beautiful. It's touching that you guys are doing something so great being in here and being able to just escape what's going on. And yeah, just when I'm like, ooh, I could just sit here, especially on the lake. I'm like, shoot, I can pretend like I got some barbecue. That's all I need. And just chill there all day.
Okay, so that gives you a sense of what's going on. And so, these stories were quite compelling to us. So we decided eventually to do an actual study. This was a randomized control trial in the hospital where we took people like those patients who have pain, and we split them up into two groups. One group got to have a VR headset with them at the bedside during their hospital stay, and the other group had a television that they can watch a health and wellness channel. So it was sort of a three-dimensional screen versus a two-dimensional TV. And then we followed them over their hospital stay, and we monitored the scores for pain that the nurses were recording. And we found across all the patients that on average, there was a larger reduction in pain in the VR group compared to the TV group. But when we looked at those with the most severe pain, scores of 8, 9, or 10 out of 10, that's where we saw the largest benefit of VR relative to the two-dimensional screen. Not just the absolute, but the relative differences were considerably larger. Now, there's also been research looking at VR for chronic pain, for outpatient use. This is a study of an 8-week, 56-day, at-home, behavioral, skills-based VR program for chronic lower back pain, a double-blind randomized trial. And it turns out this program, which I don't have any relationship with, by the way, but we do use this software in some of our research, is now FDA cleared. And what they found is when they measured the pain scores for overall the 56 days, there is a divergence in favor of virtual reality, which showed larger reductions in pain. And as I mentioned, the Food and Drug Administration has now authorized this program and is starting to create a new branch of medicine, which is called medical extended reality, or MXR. And they're now starting to approve some of these treatments. Now, we're doing other studies that are funded by the NIH to kind of, in a federally funded way, look at some of these and compare it to other forms of virtual reality. Is it just distraction that's doing this, or is there something more to it, the skills-based treatments? And I'll show you at the end, we have some openings for these studies if anyone's interested. And we're also trying to figure out what is going on in the body. What is causing this reduction in pain, or what is the mechanism of action, or MOA? So we're working with our colleagues in neuroimaging and immunology and other basic sciences to see what's going on in the brain and what's going on in the immune system and in the inflammatory systems. And how do we connect the two through what's called the HPA axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is in charge of stuff like cortisol and stress hormones and other types of neuroendocrine signals that connect the brain activity to the rest of the body. So we're starting new sets of research to try and investigate this more carefully. We're very excited about that. Now, I can go on and on. I'm going to end here. There's many, many other uses of virtual reality. And if VR is a therapy, we need a VR pharmacy. And that's why the Food and Drug Administration now has developed its medical extended reality program. This is an infographic from the very first FDA public workshop way back in March of 2020, where Cedars-Sinai was there along with, at the time, Facebook and Microsoft and other technology companies. We have a website. It's called virtualmedicine.org. On there, you can watch more videos of patients using VR. You can read our research, and you can see our different programs, including our research and development. We have multiple current trials ongoing, which you could enroll in if you're eligible. You can actually check your own eligibility there, or other people's eligibility if they're interested. And we put on a conference every year. Our conference is coming up very soon, March 30th and 31st at Cedars-Sinai. We have lots of people that come to this. It actually sells out every year. We have patients, we have doctors, nurses, technologists, developers. A very exciting 2-day conference. It's the only academic conference I've ever seen where somebody was actually scalping tickets outside of the door. We did let him in, by the way. I wrote a book about all this. It's called VRX, How Virtual Therapeutics Will Revolutionize Medicine. It goes in a lot more detail about what VR is teaching us about the nature of pain, about the control of pain through the mind and body, about the natural opioids we have in our own body that we can deploy through behavioral interventions. And what is VR teaching us about human consciousness, about neuroscience, and about the interactions between technology and clinical medicine. So that's the book called VR. Actually, it's wherever books are sold. Since we're here in Hollywood, I'm going to end with a scroll to thank all the many people who have participated in the research that I showed you today. It's a village. It takes a village to do this work. And so I want to thank everybody involved and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. Unfortunately, I can't be with you, but I'm happy to answer questions that are sent to me through the meeting organizers. And I thank you again very much for the invitation. And if you're interested, you could also follow me and our conference on Twitter at those handles there on the left.